Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Evanston. I'm Melanie Kitchner, your worship associate, and I am joined by Reverend Allison Farnham, our sabbatical minister, whom we met last week. Whether this is your spiritual home or you are newly discovering this community, it is good to share this time together. We strive to be an inclusive and welcoming community, seeking truth in love and nurturing the human spirit for a world made whole. We are guided by our principles and our values, which remind us in every moment and through every challenge that each of us is worthy of love and all we are to connect, and we are all connected through the vast and beautiful web of existence. We come together to remember our kinship with one another and to hold one another in heart and mind with tenderness and careful attention. If you are joining us from home, online, there are many links of connection in the description below the YouTube live stream screen, including the order of service credits and ways to support our mission and how to join our email list. If you are in the sanctuary, we encourage you to use the QR code, which will be up there in a minute, for the digital order of service, or to take one of the large print orders of service on the table just outside the sanctuary doors. Hymnals are available right outside those doors as well. If you have an inductive loop system, we also have an inductive loop system for anyone wearing hearing aids and is equipped with a T-coil. Your hearing aid should automatically be connected to the T-coil feature. For those of you who do not have a T-coil enabled hearing aid, we have receivers right outside the doors that can pick up the signal, and you can hear it through earphones. A few announcements. We have Get Out the Vote postcards for the upcoming Wisconsin Supreme Court election. Please see Greg Grabowski at the back of the sanctuary after the service to get your bundle of postcards. Check the newsletter for 3 interfaith events that are coming up between March 17 and 22nd. There will be a 2-day only performance of a play about the doctrine of discovery entitled We Own This Now, co-sponsored by UCE, Reba Place Church, and Garrett Theological Seminary on March 17th and 18th. Beth Emmett is hosting a 20-year anniversary celebration of the Soup Kitchen, and we regularly assist them with, and that date is March 19th. And there will be a presentation by Equity and Transformation Chicago about reparations for individuals affected by the criminal legal system here. They weren't affected by the criminal legal system here at UCE. The event will be here at UCE on March 22nd. Please support the work of our interfaith efforts and attend as many events that week as you are able. And now let us settle into our shared time of reflection, celebration, and inspiration. As we begin our worship service, those joining us online are invited to gather your chalice as we join in beloved community. Welcome to worship. Super. The Unitarian Church of Evanston resides on land that was recorded as being transferred from the local Potawatomi community to the U.S. government in 1829, before the Potawatomi were forcefully removed west of the Mississippi River. The land was then sold to white settlers. We remember the hands and bodies of the Black people who built our country's culture and economy, a role forced on them originally by enslavement. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice since 1619, acknowledging the tremors of violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact that can still be witnessed today. These acknowledgements are one small effort toward building long-term solidarity with contemporary communities. We commit ourselves to take what we learn here today and incorporate it into our lives and turn our thoughts into actions. To learn more about our congregation's land and labor acknowledgement, please visit our website. And we name these realities with honor for all the ancestors, respect for our descendants, and gratitude for the land we use as sacred space. As Sue, Griffin, and Reed, there they are, Larson, our light our chalice, symbol of our living tradition, please join in saying the words upon the screen. The chalice lights a vulnerable beginning, a spark. We light it again and again, a reminder that alone, sometimes we are but a spark. Together, we ignite, together tend the flame of hope and find our strength again. Please rise in body or spirit and join in saying the words of our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now, don't sit down. Before we sing our opening hymn, let's turn to one another briefly. For those of you participating from home, please greet one another in the chat if you haven't done so already.
What lovely conversations arise out of this shared space, and we invite you to keep continuing those conversations in the back at kinship time. But right now, we invite you to stand with us and sing hymn number 34, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How's the nest doing today? So-so. The sun is out. It's beautiful. So today's Time for All Ages is a story from a book called Perfectly Norman by Tom Percival. Norman had always been normal, perfectly normal, until one day he grew a pair of wings. Uh-oh. There's my wings. Aren't they cool? Norman had imagined growing taller or growing a beard like his dad, but he had never imagined growing a pair of wings. Still, they were here now, so he decided to test them out right away. Soon Norman was swooping around and generally having the most fun ever. But then, he had to go to dinner. You see, Norman had always been so normal, he didn't know how his parents would feel about his extraordinary wings. As he went in, Norman covered himself up in a great big coat. His parents didn't notice his wings, but they did think it was odd to be wearing a coat indoors. Bath time was problematic. So was bedtime. The coat was hot and uncomfortable, but Norman had decided that no one should ever see his wings, ever. The next day, Norman went to the park, but he was far too hot to play any of his favorite games, and it went on. Long car journeys were unbearable. The swimming pool was dreadful. And that was nothing compared to his friend's birthday party. The only time Norman could feel normal now was when it rained. One day, a boy tried to pull his coat off, and Norman had to run away, hot-faced, angry, and sad. He wished he'd never grown stupid wings. Then he saw some birds high up in the sky and remembered the joy of his first flight. It occurred to Norman that it was the coat that was making him miserable, not the wings. "Why don't you take that scruffy thing off?" suggested his mom and dad. Norman looked up at them hesitantly. His parents smiled and nodded. Norman smiled back. Then he threw off the coat and let his wonderful wings fan out. Norman leapt in the air. Finally, he was free of his coat. He noticed a few other children wearing thick, heavy coats of their own. They looked up at Norman and around one another nervously. There was a moment's pause, and then, whoosh! Yes! The sky was filled with flying people. Norman had never felt so happy. He realized that there was no such thing as perfectly normal, but he was perfectly Norman, which was just as it should be. The end.
I invite us to settle into a time of quiet reflection as we share our joys and sorrows as part of the practice of beloved community. If you ever have a joy or a sorrow that you would like spoken aloud, you can write it in this Joys and Sorrows book that's in the back of the sanctuary. There's also an opportunity to submit a Google form found on the homepage of our UC Evanston website, or you can email one of the ministers. I know that it's a little different now when you email one of the ministers, because included in that is not Reverend Eileen because she is on sabbatical. But we got you, and we got this. So let's open our hearts to listen to these offerings with tenderness and with great respect. And perhaps we can quiet our bodies and our voices as our bodies and voices allow during this sacred time by breathing together in and out. These are joys and sorrows that have been shared before our service today. From Rose Baldwin, a concern. Some of you will remember Karen Dawson, who worked in the church office in the late 80s. She had planned to visit the Unitarian Church of Evanston this morning, but slipped and fell on the ice near her home in Indiana yesterday. She had surgery this morning for a broken hip. If you want to get contact info for Karen, please let Rose know. And if you don't know Rose, you can come. Oh, she's raising her hand. And for friends who are joining us online, we got you. You can call the church office and we'll get you the info that you need. Another from Diane Markle. Good morning. I would like to share my joy and gratitude. Yesterday, I celebrated my 50th year of sobriety. Gained through the fellowship and support of the 12-step program. I'm so happy to be alive and here with you, my beloved community. That's from Diane Markle. And from Linda LaPlante. Keep me in mind next Tuesday, the 7th, as I have a hip replacement surgery in Skokie. I'm looking forward to better mobility soon. And Martha Holman. My brother, Gregory William Baum, died this past Sunday at the age of 73. His heart gave out, and my heart will miss him. He was my baby brother whom I taught to read when he was 3.5 and I was 6. He was really good at crossword puzzles. And from our Director of Lifespan Faith Formation, Kathy Underwood. Another sorrow this week in my family, the death of my father-in-law, Dave Underwood. He was a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Elgin for 45 years, a member of Rotary Club International, an engineer, a father to 3, grandfather to 8, and great-grandfather to 1. When Todd and I first started dating in high school, Dave thought I would be a great influence on his son because I liked classical music and played instruments. Perhaps his sentiments changed over the years, but we got along well and were family to each other. Wherever his spirit is now, I hope he's at peace and having fun. This sacred space is for our tender offerings and is a part of the practice of beloved community. Together we expand our celebrations and lessen the burden of grief. During the candle lighting music, you're invited to come forward and light a candle for a joy or a sorrow or a milestone in your life. And if you would like a candle brought to you, please raise your hand. We'll make sure that one comes to you. For these joys we give our thanks. For these sorrows we give our love. And for all who feel comfortable, please join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation. And please know in this time, you can always pass. As we breathe in and out, perhaps you allow your eyes to soften. And if your body needs to wiggle or color or nestle in, let it do so. Notice where your body comes into contact with something that supports you. And as you breathe in and out, notice how your lungs expand not only up, down, but to the sides, filling your belly with nourishing breath. And as you exhale, letting go of all that you do not need to be the loving gift that you are in the world. Take a moment to reflect on the past week, noticing perhaps the feelings that come up from the events of the past week in your own life or in our world. And as you sift through all the events and the feelings, perhaps you can identify a time when you felt strong. Whatever that means for you, whether it's in your heart, your spirit, your body, your mind, think of a time when you felt strong. Think of where you were, who you were with, including plants and animals, or just with yourself, and how it felt for your body. And now, holding on to that strong, supportive experience, take a moment, if you will, to think of a time when you felt vulnerable, not so strong. Think of the circumstances, what feelings are associated with it in your body and in your senses, and who you were with. What company were you keeping? Now imagine these experiences of strength and of vulnerability being held by a larger love in this beloved community. Whatever image comes to your mind, whether it's this cup, this chalice that we light that holds us all, or the chalice of your own being, or what is most sacred to you, holding these experiences with tenderness. And that perhaps as you think of these experiences, an intention bubbles up of how you want to be in the world moving forward. Is it living into the more soft, vulnerable spaces? Is it touching your strength? Or is it both? Whatever it may it be something that serves who you are, your inherent worth and dignity, while honoring our connections in this interdependent web of life. Another breath in. And as you breathe out, you might open your eyes and take in what is around you. The beloved community that surrounds you here in this space, in the spaces where you find yourself, knowing that we take this moment to create sacred space and live into the work of beloved community. May it be so. Blessed be. As we sing our response, our young people, preschool through 12th grade, are invited to head to their faith formation time with their adult leaders or remain nesting here as led by their own needs and the family and caregiving needs. Let us join in singing our sung response, number 1007 in the Teal hymnal, "There's a river flowing in my soul."
As we say in our covenant each Sunday, service is our law. UCE is called on by our mission, values, and principles to contribute to our community, to form accountable partnerships, and to express gratitude through giving. Today's offering will be shared with Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, and I invite Tom Kitchner to share about the work of UUSC.
Thanks, Melanie, and good morning, everybody. Good morning. Have you ever noticed that we say, "Spirit for a world made whole"? I mean, what a daunting concept, world. How can we have some leverage? How on earth do we face this horrendous list of tasks and duties and responsibilities? A loving Unitarian way to do that is UUSC, rooted in Unitarian values with a Unitarian board of directors and a predominantly Unitarian staff. We can proudly say that it was founded in 1940 in the Sharps Ministry, which, to their great personal peril in Czechoslovakia, was one of the very few American institutions aiding Czechoslovakian Jews from fleeing Nazi Germany. It operates today in 22 countries, and importantly, it nurtures grassroots organizations. This isn't a give somebody a fish organization. This is teach community organizations to fish type of organization. Some of the examples that UUSC does prominently are combating combating the Rohingya genocide in Burma, supporting Ukrainian refugees who have made it into Poland and Hungary, with a particular very rare emphasis among aid groups on LGBTQ individuals, and fighting for social justice at the US border. A few years ago, from our endowment, we paid for water for refugees on the US border. UUSC backed that up by providing legal representation for the good souls who were passing out the water. They also support indigenous communities in Alaska and the Pacific who are being most affected by global warming and rising waters. You can invest, and I use the word invest, not donate. You can invest in UUSC with confidence in its operations as well as its values. It has earned Charity Navigator's 4-star top ranking for 10 years running, and this is based on fiscal responsibility, mission, leadership, development, and program effectiveness based upon feedback from its partners. So thank you very much to the 50 members of this congregation who are also members now of UUSC. We invite those of you who might wish to join to please do so, and please support their good efforts now, this morning, and beyond.
Thank you, Tom. Well, you may text to give, mail in a check, or give from our website. And if you do write a check, please indicate on the memo line if your check is for the shared offering or some other giving. The ushers may now come forward to pass the collectibles down the rows. Please give as generously as you are able, and may what you give bring you joy. Thank you for your generosity. Whoops, one page. We're going to have a responsive reading, and I'll read the first line, and then you read what's on the screen. No one has ever told us we had to study our lives. Make of our lives a study as if learning natural history or music. That we should begin with the simple exercises first and slowly go on trying the hard ones. Becomes one with the daring to leap into transcendence. And in fact, we can't live like that. We take on everything at once. Before we've even begun to read or mark time, we're forced to begin in the midst of the hardest moment.
Lay me low, where the Lord can find me, form me, bless me. Well, maybe some of you all aren't connecting with all of the words in that hymn. And yet what I do know about Unitarian Universalists is that we are lifelong learners, open to interpretations and to finding the roundness in the conversation and in texts that we hear and read. And this shaker tune, to me, invites us into the spirit of humility, that even in those moments when we feel laid low, we might encounter something rich, deep, powerful, and sustaining. And how and what words we describe those, my friends, will vary from each person here joining us. And yet, can I get an amen that life sometimes can lay you low? Amen. Amen. And yet we as Unitarian Universalists understand that revelation is not sealed and that we have the opportunity again and again to approach life with a sense of humility that, as Adrian Rich describes, is very much this moment where we are off to the races. We don't know exactly always where we're going and how to do it right, and yet we can try. This puts us as human beings in a place of vulnerability. And yet the dominant culture that surrounds us tells us we're supposed to be experts. We're supposed to have it all figured out. And the waters of white supremacy culture that we swim in, that intersect with so many other oppressions, tell a story that we are supposed to be perfect and well-formed, so that by the time we get to kinship time with our mugs and we ask each other how we're doing, we say, "I'm fine, thank you." But that's not how we roll, really. We got to keep it real. Be real with one another. And working towards beloved community requires laying groundwork for that to actually be possible, for people to actually feel safe to be vulnerable with each other. There's a lot of talk about vulnerability. Let's be vulnerable with each other. Let's share each other's feelings with each other. And that actually can be a good thing if there is a safe, supportive environment where that can actually prosper in a grounded, real way that is accountable to the world that we live in. Let's be real about the world we live in. A world of interlocking, oppressive systems that create vulnerable communities, to the point where there may be folks who are not interested in sharing their vulnerabilities, particularly in spaces where they do not feel safe or supported, or where those dominant oppressive systems are not addressed and brought out and talked about. So what a beautiful thing it is for me, just in the 1 week I've been here already, to see how much groundwork you have worked on together, to be able to have rich, beautiful conversations with each other that are honest and real. And I'm, here for 20 hours in 1 week, and I'm already witnessing this beauty of how you are working toward beloved community amongst yourselves and building that world we dream of, where there are not systems of domination and oppression that create vulnerable communities. There's a woman, Dr. Carrie Yazid, who wrote an article. It's entitled, "Why Brene Brown Ain't for Black Folk." And she writes about the dangers of courage culture. She says, how can we be courageous, and she herself is black, how can we be courageous and vulnerable when white women and men become upset and start to cry about how we hate them? Every time black folk come together to talk about our lived experiences. How are we supposed to make progress in this country when many whites refuse to listen and instead play the victim every time the conversation is about us? This exhausting defensive mechanism has worked for centuries, having killed a lot of black people who were trying to be vulnerable and courageous as they spoke out against the injustices taking place within their lives and communities. It is because of these conditions that courage culture as we know it is dangerous for blacks in America. And then another viewpoint, because we like those, is from Tarana Burke, who joined with Brene Brown in writing and putting together the book, You Are Your Best Thing, Vulnerability, Shame, Resilience, and the Black Experience. Tarana Burke, if you don't know, she's a black woman who helped found the Me Too movement. And she put herself in incredibly vulnerable places by sharing her own stories that made spaces for others to share their stories. She highlights, too, this vulnerability. She talks about her experience of being a black woman, saying, we can disappear, be assaulted, be murdered under the color of law without recourse. Despite our credentials and accolades, we can be the first to be laid off. We know this and are reminded of this. We are always vulnerable, living without certainty and at risk. I share these with you because this month we're talking about vulnerability. And so it's important to find a roundness to the conversation, nuance, and complexity as we explore this theme together in our worship services. That when we ask one another to be vulnerable, there is an opportunity also to see where that strength is in the community and in the relationship before the question is even posed. And that we can continue to take a look at what is real, all that affects us when we have conversations about vulnerability. So what systemic vulnerabilities have been created by dominant culture? And what vulnerabilities have not been chosen by some and yet passively exacerbated by others who benefit from these systems? So we got to keep it real. These conversations are messy and they're worth it because there's always more to learn, right? We're always learning and growing in community and as individuals. The Jesuit theologian Walter Burkhardt once described contemplation, which I think of as a communing with the sacred, but also about a learning process, as taking a long, loving look at the real. So if all of us have been laid low, all of us surely have places of vulnerability, that we can keep that real about ourselves. And that each time a new connection is made, there's a vulnerability in that connection. When we get to know one another, and when people even join a congregation, there's a sense of vulnerability. How will this work? I often might bring up examples of being part of the Unitarian Universalist Prison Ministry of Illinois. And one example that I wanted to share with you is when I get to talk to my friend who is a Solidarity Circle leader, Jimmy Miller. And I share this with permission. He shared a story about his experience in a Solidarity Circle where he, as someone who's recently released, joined this community of good people to journey together and build community together. And how important it was for him to not only share his vulnerabilities, of which many people knew, there were many, and he would happily share those with anyone. He's pretty much an open book. And yet he also expected of those people in the circle to share their own vulnerabilities, to share when their heart was hurting, when their heart was broken. And to not do so would then create a situation where he didn't feel safe or supported. So perhaps in these conversations about vulnerability and understanding the waters that we swim in white supremacy culture and all the ways that it interlocks with various oppressions, we can find solidarity in our vulnerability and create a new space for growth and for learning. So maybe this month, let's work on keeping it real together. Blessed be. Amen. Amen. Amen.
As we extinguish the chalice, please join in saying the words on the screen by the Reverend Elizabeth Sell Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the community, or the fire of commitment, These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, number 1047, Nada te turbe.
Yep.
Second.
These words are from Carter Hayward. We touch this strength, our power, who we are in the world when we are most and fully in touch with one another and with the world. There's no doubt in my mind that in so doing, we are participants in ongoing incarnation, bringing God to life in the world. For God is nothing other than the eternally creative source of our relational power, our common strength. A God whose movement is to empower, bringing us into our own together. A God whose name in history is love. Amen. Amen. We're done. Where would we be without those amens? Still standing.